Okay, so now let us begin. One more romantic poet, or one of the most famous romantic poets, and he had written one of the most famous odes in English literature. What is the name of the ode written by John Keats, which is very famous in romantic period and romantic literature? Diksha? Goji?
Yes, sir.
So
It is
by
Ode to Nightingale,
Keats.
sir.
By Keats, Ode to
Oh,
Nightingale.
Ode to Night.
Right. So now before we begin the Ode to Nightingale, let us know important information examination point of view about John Keats. John Keats is known as pure poet. He is known as pure poet. In romantic poets, he is considered to be pure. Pure sensory experiences he wrote. And he died at the age of 26 due to consumption, tuberculosis. He apprenticed or worked as to an apothecary, a chemist, one who sells medicine. He worked as a apprentice in a medical shop. And he also worked as a child laborer in a medical store. And Keats, Lawhunt, and Hazlitt belong to the Cockney school of poetry. Cockney school of poetry is like a degraded poetry, not look down poetry, not very great poetry. By the Blackwood magazine they coined. The term came in the form of the hostile reviews of Blackwood magazine in 1817. Its primary target was Leigh Hunt, but John Keats and William Hazlitt were also included. Only Keats could properly be regarded as the Cockney, like this low standard of language. Hazlitt was not even born in London. John Scott died of duel over the controversy. Then John Keats had written first poem, Imitations of Spenser, and on first looking into the Chapman's Homer, he was greatly inspired by the Homer's literature. And third poem is Endymion. He received great criticism or bad press for the Greek mythology, and that is Endymion. Endymion is a poem about a shepherd falling in love with a woman, Cynthia, a moon goddess, in his dreams. He had seen the vision of Cynthia, a moon goddess, and then when he wake up, he wanted to find that woman. So he started his search, or he went in search of that Cynthia, moon goddess. Okay, and this poem Endymion, a piece of poem from this Endymion is extracted and given in the class 12 textbook, A Thing of Beauty. So this poem is very important, A Thing of Beauty, which is part of Endymion. I'll share the video lesson which I had shot for the class 12 students. You can go through that one. You read that poem and understand the poem summary also. Then he had written Lockhart, a critic, and Blackwood magazine. He criticized Keats very seriously, and that affected even Keats' health also. And Keats had written very beautiful odes in English literature. That those are Ode to Autumn, Ode to Gracious Urn, Ode to Nightingale, which we are going to discuss in this class, and The Eve of Saint Agnes, and La Bella Dame Sans Merci is a ballad, and Hyperion, fragmentary epic, war between Titans and Olympians. This is a fragmentary epic, and John Keats took inspiration from John Milton, Paradise Lost, to write this epic, the Hyperion, and Virgil's Aeneid was inspiration for Milton to write Paradise Lost, and John Keats took inspiration of Milton's Paradise Lost to complete Hyperion, but he could not complete Hyperion because of his sudden death. And the theme is the war between Titans and Olympians. Now, few more important information. Who said something about this John Keats criticism? So Shelley says, one of the inheritors of unfulfilled renown, and Matthew Arnold called John Keats, he is with the Shakespeare, and Shakespeare had written, my name is writ in water. Keats had no hope of being remembered as a poet, so he never believed in his greatness of his poetry. So he wrote like, my name is written in water. And the Quarterly Review is a magazine. The severe criticism of Endymion, which is believed to have hastened the Keats' death. Shelley said, I have dipped my pen in consuming fire for his destroyers. The editors of both Quarterly Review and Blackwood magazine, so they had actually spoiled the health of John Keats. Then synesthesia is the recurrent feature in Keats' poetry. Don't ask me what is synesthesia. Try to remember this word. The recurrent feature in Keats' poetry is the synesthesia. What is that? The production of a sense impression relating to one sense or part of the body by stimulation of another sense or part of the body. Mostly Keats' poetry is sensory. That means when you read Keats' poetry, you will also feel that kind of emotion in you. Hellenism, the national character of culture or Greece, especially ancient Greece, borrowed many themes plot from the Greek literature. So he had borrowed so many themes from the Greek literature and made successful writings with those plots. Now let us go to the poem Ode to Nightingale. So I too have the notes for the Ode to Nightingale. Now let us discuss what is the background of Ode to Nightingale. He was also very sad in that moment. In 1819, soon after his brother Tom's death, Keats spent some time with his friend Brown at Wentworth Place, Hampstead. A nightingale had built her nest in the garden and Keats spent much time listening to it. The following is Brown's account of the composition of the poem. Keats felt a tranquil and continual joy in its song, and one morning he took his chair from the breakfast table to the grass plot under a plum, where he sat for 2 or 3 hours. When he came into the house, I perceived he had some scraps of paper in his hands, and these he was quietly thrusting behind the books. On inquiry, I found those scraps, 4 or 5 in number, contained his poetic feeling on the song of our nightingale. The writing was not well legible, and it was difficult to arrange the stanza and so many scraps. With his assistance, I succeeded, and this was his Ode to Nightingale. The poem was first printed in July of the same year. So this is the background about the composition of the poem Ode to Nightingale. Now let us quickly complete because it has 9 stanzas. So I will not elaborate, I will explain, just meaning I will explain, and then we will discuss the poem briefly. Goji, please start the first stanza.
Hi, sir. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed and Lethiwards had sunk. It is not through envy of thy happy Lord, but being too happy in thy happiness, that thou lightwing dried of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated air.
Right. It's very simple to explain this poetry compared to Wordsworth and Shelley. It's very easy. Poet Keats watched the melodious song. He heard the melodious song sung by Nightingale, and his heart aches. Like, he got heart attack. It's not heart attack. His heart trembled with that kind of sensory pleasure. My heart aches. When he listened, I heard that song of the nightingale. A drowsy numbness pains, like a hemlock he had drunk. When people take alcohol or a liquor, they feel that kind of a drowsiness, a state of ecstasy, a state of something forgotten in the entire world. He also felt the same sensation when he listened to the song of the nightingale. Or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past, like some drug he had taken into his veins, and Lethe words had sunk. It's not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness. It is not, he's not having any kind of envy or jealous about the beautiful nightingale song. It is about his happiness he is expressing. That thou light winged dried of the trees in some melodious plot of beechen green and the shadows numberless, singst of summer in the full throated it. So when Keats listened to the song of Nightingale, he was overjoyed. Almost all he got heart attack by listening to the song. It is not because of sad, it is not because of his jealousy. He was actually happy by listening to the song. The speaker opens with a declaration of his own heart attack. He feels numb as though he had taken a drug only a moment ago. He is addressing a nightingale he hears singing somewhere in the forest and says that his drowsy numbness is not from envy of the nightingale's happiness, but rather from sharing it too completely. He is too happy that the nightingale sings the music of summer from amid some unseen plots of green trees and shadow. He was very happy of listening to this song. Diksha, next stanza.
Joseph. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and the provincial song, and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim.
Right. Generally, people, whenever they have problems in this world, when they have a lot of trauma, which not make them to go to sleep properly, not make them to not allow them to sleep, then what do generally people do? They take alcohol. They forget that problem. They forget the trauma, the psychological problems, feelings for temporary time. So in the same way here also in the second stanza, the speaker longs for the oblivion of alcohol, expressing his wish for wine, a draught of vintage that would taste like the country and like peasant dances, and let him leave the world unseen and disappear into the dim forest with the nightingale. So most of the people, they take alcohol to forget temporarily about their day-to-day life problems. But here, whether he wants to drink alcohol like other person, or he wants to come out of his problems and to forget the problems with the song of the nightingale, or the beautiful and melodious song of the nightingale, we'll come to see in the next stanza. Preeti, if you can quickly unmute and can read, please read. Preeti ji. Ghosh, please read.
Hi, sir. Fade far away, dissolve and quite forget, what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the favor, and the freight. Here where men sit and hear each other's groan, where palsy shakes a few sad lust grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and laden I despair, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow.
Right. So now he wants to fly away from these problems or from this world, along with this nightingale, or the melodious song of the nightingale. And why? Because he says that fade far away, dissolve and quite forgotten, what though among the leaves has never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret here. There are so many problems in this world. What do you call the health, the psychological issues, problems with relationships, problems with family. There are so many problems like the weariness, the fever, and the fret here, where men sit and hear each other's groan. People, what do we do most of the time? We'll share our problems, we share our sufferings, and what we are doing in turn, we are causing much more problem, much more pain to other people. So other than that, we are not doing anything. Where Plassy shakes a few sad lost grey hairs, where youth grow pale and spectre thin and dies. What happens? Youth who are very powerful, who are very strong, who are very beautiful, they grow old and they die. Where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and laden I despair. Where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eye, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So there is nothing permanent here, there is nothing great here, and he wanted to escape from these all worldly problems, miseries, along with this beautiful melodious song Nightingale. In the third stanza, he explains his desire to fade away, saying he would like to forget the trouble the nightingale has never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret of human life, with its consciousness that everything is mortal and nothing lasts. Youth grows pale and spectry thin and dies, and beauty cannot keep her lustrous eye. So everything is transient, temporary in this world. So he wanted to move away from this kind of problem along with the nightingale. That means poet feels that the nightingale song is permanent. It is not transient, it is not temporary on the planet Earth. Now let us go to the next stanza. Diksha.
Sure, sir. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by, so it is Bacchus.
Bacchus and his parts.
Oh, sir. Bacchus and his parts, but on the viewless wings of poesy, though the dull brain perplexes and retards. Already with thee tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry face, but here there is no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways.
Right. Now here he wants to say, he wants to go away from all these worldly miseries, problems, all those things, but not charioted by Bacchus and his part, not by drinking alcohol and forgetting all these worldly problems. He wanted to go out of this place to a very distant place, not by drinking alcohol, but on the viewless wings of poesy. That means you want to take the help of poetry to come out of these problems and miseries and trauma and the sufferings of the worldly life. Though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee tender is the night, and Haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry fires. But here there is no light. He wanted to see the greatness, happiness, all those things, but it is everything is dark here. In the fourth stanza, the speaker tells the nightingale to fly away and he will follow not through alcohol, but through the poetry, which will give him viewless wings. He says he is already with the nightingale and describes the forest glade where even the moonlight is hidden by the trees except the light that breaks through when the breezes blow the branches. He could see slightly the beauty of the forest when he started flying along with the nightingale song, but not with the alcohol, but with the help of poetry. So poetry gives him relief from the worldly pleasures, worldly pains, and gives some kind of a pleasure out of all these things. Goji, next stanza.
Yes, sir. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. But in emblem darkness, gaze each sweet wherein the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit true wild white hawthorn and the pastoral eglantine. Fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid May's eldest child, the coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eyes.
Right, so it is slight moonlight is there in the forest. He could not see everything in the forest, but he could sense and he could feel and he could smell something or some things in that forest. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, not what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in the emblemed darkness, slightly visible, it is not pitch dark. Guess each sweet wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild. White hawthorn and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid May's eldest child, the smell from the musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurer's hunt of flies on summer eve. So he was traveling with his nightingale song, not with the alcohol, but with the viewless wings of his poetry. In the fifth stanza, the speaker says that he cannot see the flowers in the glade, but can guess them in emblemed darkness. White hawthorn, eglantine, violets, and the musk rose, the murmurous haunt of flies on the summer eve. Sitting in the dark and listening to the bird song, he is unable to see the flowers that blossom all around him. The atmosphere is fragrant with odors, and he tries to distinguish each flower by its scent in the dark. There is something in the atmosphere to ravish all his senses. So his senses was completely enthralled by the beauty of the song or the mesmerism of the nightingale voice. Next one, Diksha.
Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems rich to die, to seize upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain. To thy high requiem become a sod.
Right. So he wants to die when the nightingale is singing. Simple. All his problems, all his miseries, all his worries will fade away or will be erased from his life if he dies. But he wanted to die when the nightingale was singing. In the sixth stanza, the speaker listens in the dark to the nightingale, saying that he has often been half in love with the idea of dying and called death soft names in many rhymes. Surrounded by the nightingale's song, the speaker thinks that the idea of death seems richer than ever, and he longs to seize upon the midnight with no pain, while the nightingale pours its soul ecstatically forth. If he were to die, the nightingale would continue to sing, he says, but he would have ears in vain and be no longer able to. He was so troubled by the people, troubled by the consumption of tuberculosis, and he was even, deserted, or he one beloved also. His beloved Fanny Brown was also, not happy. So he wanted to die when nightingale is continuously singing. Next, Goji.
Hi, sir. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bud. No hungry generation tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown, perhaps the selfsame song that found a path to the sad heart of Ruth when sick for home. She stood in tears amid the alien corn, the same that oftentimes had charmed magic casements opening on foam of perilous seas in fairylands fallen.
Now he compares his life with this Nightingale song. It is eternal. Eternal in the sense this Nightingale must have sung even in the what do you call Jesus Christ age, or before Jesus Christ also this Nightingale was present, and its song might have enchanted or inspired the Ruth also when he was traveling back to home. In the seventh stanza, the speaker tells the Nightingale that it is immortal. He says that it was not born for death. He says that the voice he hears singing has always been heard by ancient emperors, clones, and by homesick Ruth. He even says the song has often charmed open magic windows looking out over the foam or perilous seas in fairy lands for loons. That means in those days when these beautiful princes were imprisoned in those remote castles with a tower like structure with one single room, when they listened to the songs of Nightingale, they felt that somebody will come and save them. So all these things explains about the immortality of the Nightingale, not bird, Nightingale song in this world. Next, Diksha. Diksha, not audible? You're not audible, Diksha.
He not audible.
And now you are audible, Diksha.
Hello, so am I audible?
Yes, now you are audible.
Read now.
Yes.
His life call me back from thee to my soul sense. Adieu, the fans not cheat so well as she is fanned to do, deceiving else. Do you, thy plaintive anthem fades, pass and near me the burden stream. Uphill tide and now this buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music, do I wake or sleep?
Now, when he was writing this poem, he was also got confused whether it was a dream or in a real life, whether he heard the Nightingale song and went into a deep sleep or it is really a dream. Forlorn, what is the word forlorn? Brings him rudely back from the regions of bliss to which the bird has transported him, to the world of ugly and unpleasant realities. So what happened, the moment he stopped listening to the bird's song, Nightingale's song, he entered again, he returned to the worldly problems and this ugly world. He wants to say, imagination has not been powerful enough to keep up that illusions of joy. He bids goodbye to the vision, the song is dying away and soon nothing is heard. He is left wondering whether it was all real or just a dream. So when he came into consciousness, when he come to senses, he felt very bad, he felt very sad that it made him to again remember, recollect what is happening in his life. In the 8th stanza, the word forlorn tolls like a bell to restore the speakers from his preoccupation with the nightingale and back into himself. As the nightingale flies farther away from him, he laments that his imagination has failed him and says that he can no longer recall whether the nightingale's music was a vision or a waking dream. Now that the music is gone, the speaker cannot recall whether he himself is awake or asleep. He was in a confusion, state of confusion, right? So now, what we can understand from these stanzas, the poet wants to, how many stanzas did I tell you in the beginning? 9 stanzas or 8 stanzas?
So till now we done 8 stanzas.
Eight only. If I said 9 stanzas, I was wrong. This entire poem, the Ode to Nightingale, has 8 stanzas. Okay. Now what we can understand from this poem, if we just go through it very quickly, John Keats was in many problems, suffering with so many problems like health problems, psychological problems, relationship problems, and he was very depressed. And at that moment, when he watched or when he listened to the beautiful song of Nightingale, he got little inspiration and he wanted to enjoy with the Nightingale or like Nightingale song, and he had written this poem. And what is actually here in this poem says that he wanted to enjoy the he wanted to have happiness of Nightingale, but he doesn't want to fly away from miseries, problems, and all his sufferings of the worldly things, not by drinking alcohol, but with the wings of viewless poetry. So he believes that the Nightingale has inspired him, and with his poetry he can come out of all these problems, or he can temporarily forget about his problems in his life. And at the end, when he came to realize that, when he came back to senses, when he returned to senses, he felt very sad because he had come in touch with reality. So he escaped from this world, or he advises people to escape from these worldly problems with the help of this kind of romantic poetry. So that is the end of the poem Ode to Nightingale, written by one of the very famous romantic poets in English literature, is John Keats. Now if you have any questions related to the poem Ode to Nightingale, you can ask me.